Songs are usually connected with feelings of happiness and joy, playing with our emotions as we listen along. Songs can produce many different feelings depending on their style and genre. At the same time, mainstream music would often feature songs that are catchy, upbeat and easy to listen to make people almost addicted. These songs are often associated with their album covers, which are designed to be non-offensive and appealing to everyone. Now this channel loves to look at weird and dark things in our world. That's why this video will be dedicated to the most disturbing album covers that are often stashed away from the public eye. Albums you will not usually see in your mainstream stores. This chart works by starting with the most obscure mainstream covers and slowly, over time, diving into obscurity, followed by disturbing stuff you won't see anywhere else. But I will also talk a bit about the album and the artist so that you can form your own opinion about the art they created. Plus, I also have listened to every single album just to understand the cover and the vibe of the album a bit better. Good, grab something to drink and snack and let's dive in. Nirvana was a storm that took over the music world in the 90s, and Kurt Cobain's unmatched energy was desperately needed by the scene. Even if they explore sometimes deep topics. Nirvana became a mainstream sensation, but don't let that fool you. Behind the catchy hooks and unforgettable riffs, there are a lot of darkness and raw emotions.
I'm pissed off about everything in general, and so all these songs are pretty much about my battle with things that piss me off, and that's just the whole theme of the whole album.
The first album cover on this list we will look at is In Utero, their third and final studio album released on September 21, 1993. Kurt Cobain claimed that the album was very impersonal, as many of the songs contain heavy references to personal life and struggles. Kurt originally wanted to name the album I Hate Myself and I Want to Die, which was quickly rejected by the label, but they still managed to choose an album cover they wanted, even if it's beautiful and yet unsettling at the same time. The cover features something that resembles an angel with open arms but with transparent skin and body. The angel has exposed organs, veins and muscles beneath the translucent skin. Her wings are spread wide, giving her almost a holy presence despite the medical sterile eeriness of the exposed insides. The image isn't gory, but it's uncomfortable. Portraying an angel in such a fragile and lifeless state is just a bit surreal in my opinion, as it strips away any warmth from the angelic symbolism. It's quite an iconic album cover that deserves to be on this list, and just a quick fun fact here, some retailers even censored the back cover of this, which featured models of fetuses arranged in a collage style.
All of it was my idea, except for the large woman. It was just, he just happened to film her one day when we weren't there, and it was incredible. I mean, it turned out so great.
Here are the Beatles!
I don't know if there is a possibility you never heard about the Beatles. Even if they are not my cup of tea, saying that they were quite popular is an understatement, as they were a world phenomenon. They are widely regarded as the most influential band in the Western music world. They would often combine music styles ranging from folk to psychedelia and hard rock. Now let's go to 1967 when they released their album called Yesterday and Today. At that time the Beatles were at the peak of their popularity, but despite the album being good, it wasn't their best work. And something that definitely didn't help was the album cover, which caused quite a backlash for the band. The original cover featured the Beatles dressed in butcher clothing, surrounded by decapitated baby dolls and raw meat.
the photographer was a bit of a surrealist, you know?
Apparently they wanted to create a satirical commentary on the butchering of their albums by Capitol Records, who would frequently chop up their UK releases into US only compilations.
Why are you also horrid snobbing?
Oh, what?
We're not horrid snobby.
Yes, you are.
No, we seem
That's your version.
In your mind, they are.
Because we're not flattering you.
But the problem was that the public perceived the cover as gruesome and tasteless, especially as they had a cheerful expression on their faces, which gave the album cover an unsettling vibe.
It got out in America when there was some kind of fuss.
And when you really think about it, it's almost like the album cover tries to send a message about animal treatment and not record companies. And this was actually so bad that on June 10 the same year, the record company initiated Operation Retrieve, recalling all the LP copies and promotion materials just to replace this problematic image. The total cost for this replacement was $250,000, which is like $2.3 million in 2024, which wiped out the company's initial profit. But let's go to something a bit more unsettling.
We really got into it, and that's how we felt. Yeah.
An experimental group of artists, known as Throbbing Gristle, had been forging their own electronic industrial sounds in their Death Factory.
Now what do you think about this album cover? Now at first glance there is nothing ominous or weird going on, just 4 band members casually chilling on a cliff. But let me break it down for you, about what's really going on here. Throbbing Gristle was an English music and visual arts group.
And we were sort of trying to reflect all these sounds and the way they all come together into like this weird mishmash of electronic experimental.
What I did know, they were apparently widely regarded as the pioneers of industrial music. And they built their reputation through aesthetics, often using offensive visual imagery, particular symbols, or pornography even. And mostly as a public stunt, I guess.
Grim.
Yeah, it was grim. It was very run down.
Back to the album. So what's disturbing about it? Well, the location is. The picture was shot at Beachy Head, England. The cliffs in the background are actually the highest cliff in whole Britain, with a height of 162 meters or 530 feet. Now the height of the cliffs plus the remote setting made it an ideal spot for people who want just to their life journey.
Part of the chaplaincy team who come up here in all weathers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and save people's lives by intervening when they need it most, right on the edge.
Estimations of numbers of annual deaths at Beachy Head vary from 20 to even 30 a year, and it's ranked as the 3rd most infamous spot related to suicide besides the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and the Akikohara Forest in Japan, which is an absurdly high number when you think about it. That almost 30 people a year commit here suicide. That's the sole reason why this cover is on the list. It's deeply unsettling when you know about the context and its depictive nature, and this album cover is a perfect way to show us that something that at first glance looks pretty normal and chill is actually quite disturbing. But don't worry, we will also dive into the gruesome stuff, just wait a little bit. And prepare your bucket.
We were never punk, we're not punk, we were industrial. We're an industrial experimental music band.
This album is called Daytona. Here with the song If You Know, You Know, Pusha T.
Finally, we have a rap album on our hands, and I tried my best to include different types of music on this chart, as this chart slowly started to turn into a metal based album cover chart, and that's something that I really wanted to avoid. So let's talk about Daytona. It was released in 2018 by Pusha T, and it features a few big names like Rick Ross and Kanye West. The album features, like every serious rap album, sharp lyrics about society, and it was beautifully accompanied by Kanye West's minimalist production. People really embraced this album and it was praised by the fans. On the other side, the album cover was a double-edged sword. Many argued whatever using this image was artistic commentary or insensitive exploitation. Perhaps this blurry picture doesn't give you much context, but let me tell you about a few more details about this photo. This is an actual photograph of Whitney Houston's drug-littered bathroom taken in 2006, reportedly during the height of her addiction struggles. Whitney Houston is an American singer, actress and one of the best-selling music artists of all time. She is known for her powerful voice and unmatched vocal range. But despite all success, fame and money, her life is marked by personal struggles with addiction, which ultimately contributed to her tragic death in 2012. So that's why this picture is unsettling. It's chaotic, it's messy. It gives us a peek into her life at the time she suffered the most. It feels somehow very personal to me, if you know what I mean. Apparently Kanye West, who produced the album, reportedly paid $85,000 to license the photo just few days before the album's release. Is it ethical or immoral is something that I let you decide here, and this is only the start. Trust me, we will get into much more stuff.
I just told you who I thought I was. A god. I just told you. That's who I think I am.
We mentioned West in the last entry, so why not to continue with him? Kanye West is one of the most prominent figures in hip-hop. I don't think he needs a long introduction, but he is one of the world's best-selling music artists with over 160 million records sold. West has also won 24 Grammy Awards. But there is a reason why the public loves him, and that's because he loves to do controversial things wherever he goes.
Am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation.
Like the time he wore a Burzum t-shirt. There is nothing wrong with a guy supporting your friendly neighborhood church burning guy. Because of his nature, he wanted a special cover for his 2010 album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Even if this album was quite successful, you will still see it censored in the stores, and the censored version would look like this. The original art cover was done by George Kondo, and it shows a surreal abstract paint of Kanye West lying on his back, and on top of him is like a nude female figure. And this woman has no arms, and it has a quite demonic expression with exaggerated features. What makes this picture a bit unsettling is the autonomy and the chaotic way how it was drawn. According to Kondo, West requested the original cover to be provocative enough to be banned by retailers as a public stunt. This cover is maybe more surreal than disturbing, but somehow a weird looking angel without arms grinding Kanye's legs is a bit disturbing, or at least we can say his facial expression is. But that's only the first layer, so let's go to the second layer where the fun starts.
Hey man, I'm a genius, alright? I'm the most talented musician in the world!
As a Slayer fan, I felt obligated to put at least one Slayer cover on this list. And while Christ Illusion is great, and it was also the first choice for this entry, with the depiction of a mutilated Jesus swimming in body parts is quite gruesome, Raining Blood is a classic that deserves a spot due to the tracks featured and the amount of the detail the cover provides. Slayer is, if you didn't know, an American thrash metal formed in 1981, and besides Metallica, Anthrax and Megadeth, is considered one of the big fours of thrash and metal scene. The album's opening track, Angel of Death, was so controversial due to its lyrics about the Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele that it almost caused the album to be shelved, and the whole vibe of the album and the art style feels very chaotic, with demon figures, mutilated bodies, abstract horrors and satanic undertones. But this is what Slayer is about. The color palette is mostly browns and reds, giving it a hellish medieval vibe. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite album covers, but the number one is still South of Heaven. However, because of the impact and the legacy the album had, plus all the tracks that are featured are quite morbid, I think it deserves a spotlight for the opening of the second layer. How the cover sends dark and disturbing vibes and dives into themes of war, death and religious corruption is just a perfect way how the album gets along with the cover. The longer you stare at it, the more gruesome details you will notice.
Art can be a reflection of society, but evil is everywhere, man. Everybody's got it. It sits really deep in everybody. Some people can't control it as much as others, but I think it's there.
Guns N' Roses is an American hard rock band formed in Los Angeles, California in 1985, and since then they managed to rock the world with many hits like Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City and Sweet Child O' Mine. Interestingly, all these songs are featured on their 1987 album called Appetite for Destruction. It even became the best-selling album of all time in the United States. Even if they received success, they received also backlash. Many of you probably know about the album's cover, which is a simple cross with the band members' skulls around it, and it's considered an absolute classic by fans nowadays. But the original artwork was so much surreal, and it can be described as unsettling. The original artwork depicts a robotic rapist looming over a partially nude, blooded woman who appears to be assaulted. And we don't need to argue that this is unsettling, but that's not the end. As above them, there is a monstrous skeleton cyborg creature with fangs and metallic wings descending, seemingly like wanting to punish the robot. At least I hope he wants to punish the robot. It's a very detailed and vividly colored album cover, but the retailers and the parents weren't so thrilled about this original art cover, and many retailers refused to stock the album with this cover. And under pressure from Geffen Records, they replaced this artwork with the now iconic skull cross design. Entries on this list are unsettling, they are morbid, and oftentimes you're looking at them and you're seeing that something is off and it isn't right. But there are also album covers that are straight as an arrow in their intentions. Dead Grips is a group that some people consider an experimental hip-hop group. They formed the band in 2010 in Sacramento, California. They often would draw inspiration from punk rock, electronic, noise and industrial styles. Now their album, Now Love Deep Web, was released on October 1st, 2012, and it's considered their most heaviest album yet. And because of that, the three band members wanted something hard and fitting for the album cover, and they ended up with this. And now you would ask, what's so weird about this black bar? Well, underneath this black bar is actually a picture of the drummer's erect dick, with the whole album cover totally written across it. Even if the album was received quite well by the fans, the album cover was met with heavy criticism. And imagine just walking in a store, looking to your left, and you will see a vinyl record with the drummer's ding dong plastered all over the album cover. MC Rai, the frontman, responded to the critics by saying, "If you look at that and all you can see is a dick, I don't really have anything to say to you pretty much. I look at it and I said, this is a great photo and I'd love for this to be the album cover." The band said they saw this as something tribal, spiritual, like in Primal, but they would also say that many people didn't recognize this form of art. I don't know what to tell you about this, it's just a dick plastered on an album cover. I don't have any more comments about this.
Things like that, and also all of us are very into the visual arts and are visual artists.
I feel like this album cover needed to be included because of the absurdity it tries to portray. Much like the last entry we covered, Angel Count is a band name that I can't even say on YouTube without risking demonetization. But I can tell you it isn't worth your attention, not because it's a grindcore album and I don't like them so much, but it's very in your face, loud and chaotic, with just offensive flavor added to the mix. The frontman Seth Putman was known for its anti-everything attitude. And the album is really about violence, hatred and extreme vulgarity. Their album, It Just Gets Worse, was released in 1999. Even though the art is quite simple with its cartoonish style, it's a big F you to everyone, as the band members just want grinds people gears. So let's talk about the cover itself. On the right side you will see a burning baby stroller, and on the left you will see a vagina and an asshole just randomly floating up there, because I don't know, it's offensive I guess. Editing snarky here, so the floating and the floating asshole are actually the symbol of the band. So back to the entry. And in the middle you will see a guy who is raping a girl who is beaten up and trapped in a medieval beheading device. It's so over the top, it's just ridiculous. This feels like a true work of an edgelord, and That's why I put it on the list, but I couldn't bring myself to put it any lower because it's just dumb and I don't see anything deep about this. So let's move to the next entry.
And were you an asshole from the get-go, or did you have to work on it?
For as long as I remember, I've been as a little kid, I was an asshole, so...
Ministry is an industrial metal band that was founded in Chicago in 1981. They are considered pioneers of industrial rock and metal in the late 1980s, and they dropped quite a few albums back in the late 80s and 90s. But their 1999 album The Dark Side of the Spoon managed to be the most controversial thing they brought to the table, because Warner Bros. Even dropped them from the label. And sorry about the rhyme, which later led to an extended hiatus in the early 2000s as the front member would spiral down due to drug abuse. So what's so controversial about this album cover? The Dark Side of the Spoon would feature less aggressive song that Ministry would previously produce. They say they wanted to branch out from the drug-infused records like The Mind is a Terrible Thing of Taste and Falcon 69 to more unfamiliar territory. Also, it's quite obvious that the album's name is a reference to Pink Floyd's album The Dark Side of the Moon, but we can also look at a spoon as something to dissolve hate. And they use this reference of a spoon because many of the band members were long-term drug addicts. The cover they used for this album depicts a nude, obese woman sitting in the front of a blackboard with "I will be God" written repeatedly on it. The repeated phrase "I will be God" could represent a God complex often associated with heavy drug use, especially age, as there were some users who reported to feel invisible or detached from reality, elevating themselves to a divine status. While not being explicitly violent or sexual, it's surreal, and when you look at the cover as a whole package, it does get its point across about raw reflection of addiction and self-destruction, but definitely a good constructed album cover, especially compared to the last one.
To these people, Al is like, weird drug god, kind of untouchable, indestructible, how the hell is he still alive kind of guy.
Now, Marilyn Manson is no stranger to danger, and he is often well known for his obscure and weird imagery and songwriting. If you don't know anything about him, he's an American rock goth industrial musician. He is an artist who puts a lot of effort in his image and the creation of his art. The fact that he based his name on the actress Marilyn Monroe and the cult leader Charles Manson can give you a small indication of where we are going with this. There are many obscure things to cover about his career, but the one we will look at today is the album cover for Hollywood in the Shadow of the Valley of Death, released with generally positive reviews in the year 2000. Now, I also wanna go back to that year, as it was marked by fear and public outrage. And why, you ask? The album was released in the aftermath of the Columbine High School massacre, where students Eric Harrison and Dylan Klebold shot dead 12 students and a teacher and wounded 21 others. Before committing suicide, national media would report that these perpetrators were wearing band t-shirts during the rampage.
A gang of kids wearing Marilyn Manson t-shirts got up a school or something live on Fox, and I was saying, oh, this is... why, so now I think that I've been blamed for about 36 school shootings.
And how they are influenced by their music taste and also their love for the game Doom. By the way, if you didn't know, they recreated the whole school in Doom, which is a rabbit hole for another day. But back to the album. What it depicts is an image featuring Marilyn Manson crucified, with his lower jaw entirely ripped off, exposing raw flesh and bone. His expression is cold and haunting, and the overall vibe feels sacrilegious and unsettling. The combination of gore and mutilations definitely pushed many buttons back in the day, especially at that time because people would look at Marilyn Manson as a type of martyr, but the news would also turn this album into a scapegoat for all the bad things that happened. But the album was carefully crafted and was set in so-called Hollywood, a satirical version of modern-day America, portrayed as an almost Disney-like amusement park obsessed with death, violence and hyper-consumerism, and the whole album felt like a metaphor for society's outcasts and imperfections. But your mainstream news outlets would fail to recognize this, and they didn't see the message about Americans' cultural fixation on guns, God and government. But before we end this entry, I wanted to share with you a very interesting clip from Marilyn Manson about the Columbine shooter.
Of television in general, if you die and enough people are watching, then you become a martyr, you become a hero, you become well known. So when you have things like Columbine and you have these kids that are angry and they have something to say and no one's listening, the media sends a message that if you do something loud enough and it gets our attention, then you will be famous for it. Those kids ended up on the cover of Time magazine. The media gave them exactly what they wanted, and that's why I never did any interviews when that happened, when I was getting blamed for it, because I felt that I would be contributing to what I found to be reprehensible.
From above. My ideas come from above, a higher source.
Haram is a collaborative studio album by American hip-hop duo Armand Hammer and the record producer The Alchemist. It was released on March 26, 2021. The Alchemist is known for his dark and experimental production, and he's actually quite beloved by the underground scene, with people praising his style. The title Haram translates from Arabic to forbidden or sacred prohibition in Islam. The Alchemist also gained wide recognition for producing the 2000 single The Realest for Mobb Deep, which really helped him establish his signature sound. Now, the image they chose for this album was a close-up shot of two slaughtered pig heads. The first group who immediately called out this album cover were the animal rights group PETA, who call it terrifying and cruel, and told the Alchemist he should change it and focus on the music and not on the shock value of dead animals. Nevertheless, the album was praised by the fans. It is raw and it's cruel, and pigs would often symbolize greed and corruption. But I think that two bloody pig heads deserve to be on layer 3, as I still consider that quite disturbing.
I will be alive for a short time, but this energy was here before me and it will be here after me.
If you love heavy metal and have ever tried to dive a bit deeper into the heavier stuff, Cannibal Corpse has probably crossed your path. They're an American death metal band formed in Buffalo, New York in 1988. Even though they had very little radio and television exposure, they definitely managed to gain a cult following. The band's lyrics, song titles and the album cover drive heavily on horror fiction and horror films. Many would consider their lyrics as morbid and explicit and over the top, but that's how they roll. I mean, the frontman is called Corpse Grinder, and some of their hits are called Fire with a Knife, I Blood, or Shooting Blood or Butchered at Birth. This is also the cover we are looking at right now, although it's censored for obvious reason. The album cover was illustrated by an artist called Vincent Locke. The cover shows two zombie-like surgeons performing a grotesque and bloody cesarean section on a pregnant woman while surrounded by mutilated baby corpses. Even if their art style is cartoonish and over the top, it's what Cannibal Corpse is about, and that's how they push it to the limit. The whole album is raw, it's a pure portrayal of old school death metal, and that's why it's praised by the fans. The graphic album cover leaves little to the imagination. It's not suggestive, it's explicit. For many, it crosses the line from art into pure gore.
I don't know. I can't really say I've actually been on stage or in the studio thinking about beating shit out of somebody or harming anyone, because I'm not violent, you know. Yeah. Just a fun-loving guy.
And also, fun fact, this is why I use those special two surgeons on my thumbnail about the history of gore content, as from my perspective, they were the perfect fit. By the way, Cannibal Corpse was featured in a movie with Jim Carrey, Ace Ventura, if you didn't know.
Excuse me, it's Frank here. Thank you.
CKY is something that some of you know as the predecessor to the popular show and later movies called Jackass. CKY, or Camp Kill Yourself, was not only a series produced by Ben Margera, but it was also a band made by his brother. That's why the series and the band would feature each other's footage. Some consider the 1999 CKY album Volume 1 as a classic alternative metal skate punk album. If you grew up with Tony Hawk Pro Skater or Jackass, there is no way you didn't heard about them. Absolute classic from this album is a song that I even listen today called 96 Quite Bitter Beings. The guitars are in your face, the drums alternately riding on the downbeat while the backing vocals switch back and forth with the chanting like wooing. It's gritty and raw like the cover of the album. It features a distorted image of a face, partially obscured, drenched in shadows, and combined with a red color palette. The design features that low-res aesthetic, really mirroring the vibe of the album. If you look carefully, you would see also a guy holding an upside-down cross, which is placed in his mouth to make the act of suicide. While Volume 1 doesn't feature the most disturbing cover out there, the eerie and haunting aesthetics and use of the cross reference as a shotgun are quite morbid in my opinion, and I think a good fit for this chart. We had many weird and some disturbing stuff until now, but somehow we failed to add anything related to bugs, and I feel it's quite unfair to all the nice folk who hate bugs. So that's why the Lord Mantis album Perperator is on the list. First of all, Lord Mantis was an American sludge band founded in 2005. The guitars would often play slowed rhythms and breakdowns while the lyrics are something you will usually see in the black metal scene with its high-pitched screams. The music would blend black metal's bleak atmosphere with sludge metal crushing heaviness, if this makes any sense to you. I would consider the album to be alright if you're into such things. For the album cover, the band decided to hire Jeff Whitehead from Leviathan, and he painted a very grim picture. It almost looks like a illustration from a medieval book, with many humanoid creatures with exaggerated twisted limbs, and it's quite terrifying because of the faces, which are quite insect-like. It's quite hard to explain, and also all of these creatures do have something coming out of their mouth, which is going in the private area of the right one, which looks like Jesus, and he's crucified on a cross. The art is grotesque, unholy, and most importantly unsettling. And we can even call it properly disturbing. It captures the sense of moral and physical decay, if one can say so. Korn is one of the new metal giants that shook the scene like no other. Their combination of down-tuned guitars and groovy vibes featured with dark lyrics are catchy and morbid at the same time. After you hear the song Daddy, you'll never be the same. The singer would go in so much detail about how he was essayed as a child, with his screams being so real it's hard to listen to the song. Because of such themes, they would also choose a cover that gets along with their style, and a perfect example is the haunting cover of their debut album Korn, released in 1994. The album cover was photographed by Steven Stickler, and it simply depicts a young girl on a playground swing set. What made the whole scene uncanny was the shadow man looking at her. He is tall, menacing, holding what appears to be a horse-shaped toy or even possibly a weapon. The image is captured from a low angle, making the shadows seeming looming and predatory. This image isn't gory or even explicit, it's just unsettling, and it sends a very dark message about our society and how we need to watch out for the little ones because they are nowhere safe.
It's not about my parents molesting me and any of that. It was about me being abused by someone else and my parents not really believing me, which I believe happens to tons of kids. I believe tons of kids go back and say, hey mom, dad, this shit happened. They're like, stop lying. Or they don't understand. And they were really young at the time, and I don't blame them. And it was my babysitter, and she's since on passed away. Karma's a bitch.
This isn't just disturbing but also quite sick, and that's why it's the perfect fit for this list, as this entry is quite unique and I feel you know in which direction we are going. But here goes nothing. Heavy Petting Zoo, known also as Eating a Lamb on the LP version, is the 6th studio album by the American punk rock band NoFX. It was released on January 31, 1996 through Epitaph Records. They are a quite popular band that gained popularity in the wake of the 1990s punk rock revival revolution. I know it's completely for shock value and it's probably intended as a dark joke, at least I hope it is. But still, this makes me very uncomfortable. There are two different cover images of this album I want to talk about, both illustrated by Mark DeSalvio, a noted designer for punk album art. It depicts a man in a central position with a sheep. Basically, the sheep is sitting in his lap while the man is touching the private areas of the sheep. But on the 12-inch vinyl record, it gets even wilder as the man and the sheep are doing 69. Just freaking gross, and the fans weren't thrilled either about this. And I don't know if zoophilia is a good way to promote your band. And I don't need to tell you that this album cover is banned in many countries because of this cover.
It was funny. Music's not supposed to be perfect. And that's the beauty of punk rock.
Anarchy is the 6th studio album from the punk band called Chumbawamba. Now the band is a mix between punk rock, folk and pop influences, and the album tackles themes of political corruption, social injustice, class struggles and anarchy with its sharp wit and biting commentary. This album was even a commercial success, giving the group their first top 40 album on the UK album charts. It's a alright album I guess after listening it, but man, the album cover is quite something. I know it's natural and this shouldn't be something disturbing, but the first time I saw the album cover it was blurred and I didn't know what it was, and it was even weirder for me, like what's that? And then I looked at original cover, which is an unfiltered photograph of a baby coming out during childbirth, and the band stated that this should symbolize hope, rebirth and the rawness of life. Now imagine how the retailers and some people reacted when the band started to push out these vinyls. And also the alternative cover featured a black background with just the band name, which was later released to please retailers. Like I said, this should be disturbing, it's very natural, but I don't know how I would feel if I would see a vinyl in a store displayed with this cover. I hope you catch my drift here. Point Blank, it is a side project of Max Cavalera from Sepultura and Alex Newport of Fudge Tunnel. So this project or album explores themes of war, hatred, political corruption and social decay, delivered with ferocious intensity, which is perfectly accompanied by the industrial sound they bring to the table, as it sounds very chaotic, almost mimicking a battlefield itself. Point Blank was released in 1994 and it was praised by metalheads. The cover of this album depicts a photo of a female Vietnamese civilian with a US soldier's gun to her head. The style of the photograph is black and white and it just shows a desperate facial expression of a poor woman who was captured in a war. But the album cover perfectly paints with its raw themes of violence, war, suffering. As someone who was born at the end of a war, stories you would hear are more than terrible, and the woman's facial expression was just a mirror of those people who I talked to, who even want to talk about it. I know that my father didn't want to tell anything to me or my brother, but due to recent events he opened up a bit about some stuff, and the reasons why he didn't want to talk about it are more than clear. So that's why this haunting cover needs to be on the list. By the way, this picture was taken from the Vietnamese war documentary In the Year of the Pig from 1968, and the good news is that this poor woman on the cover lived after the photo was taken. Acid Bat is a band that I knew for quite a while but never tried to research anything about them. But I know about their covers, so that's why I included their album When the Kid String Pops, which was released on August 8, 1994. The problem is now that I enjoy the album more than I like to admit, but somehow low-tuned guitars with heavy, slow riffs, plus the raw vocals always seems to grab my attention. But sludge metal would be sludge metal without some nihilistic lyrics about discussing poverty, drugs, addiction, pollution and often suicide. Really cheerful stuff I need in my life right now. I know I can't talk about the lyrics as they are more than explicit, but we can take a look at the cover. For you normal people who are not into crime cases, you're probably thinking, what's so special about a obese clown? Well, if you know, you know, but if you don't know, this clown is actually known as Pogo the Clown. And it was a nickname for a very infamous guy known as John Wayne Gacy, who actually painted this picture. It's known as the painting titled Untitled Number 11. The name should already send shivers down your spine if you know anything about him. He was indeed a clown who performed at children's parties dressed as the Pogo the Clown, later known as the Clown. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender who assaulted and murdered at least 32 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978 in Chicago, Illinois. So it's quite an old case, but still. He would lure his victims to his home, often offering them work as he had a small company even. After he lured them into the house, he would torture, rape and kill them, burying most of the bodies in the crawl space under his house. He was arrested in 1978, convicted of 32 murders and executed by lethal injection in 1994, and the story about him is more than surreal if you dive into it.
I killed 33 times, you're only gonna kill me once. Casey outsmarted him again.
And I think there is a pretty good Netflix documentary about it if you want to dive deeper, but I can also make a video if you want. So that's why this album cover is in the list. It is more than surreal. It's eerie with some childlike innocence, yet it has so much ominous undertones going on, it's really unsettling. Now, is it a bit immoral to have such a cover? Well, yes, but trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to things like this. But let's see what awaits us on the next layer.
And I know this is going to look like we're destroying everything. Don't worry about it. We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
Carcass is an English extreme metal band from Liverpool, formed in 1985. Carcass is known for their nasty riffs, pinch harmonic and the singer's voice which closely resembles a wild boar with rabies. Carcass is regarded as one of the pioneers of grindcore and melodic death metal, more often than not featuring morbid lyrics and gruesome album covers, like their album Reek of Putrefaction, which was released in 1988. The cover art features a collage of graphical medical photographs, including decaying corpses, severed limbs and rotting flesh. This chaotic arrangement of body parts and gore creates quite a stunning image. The whole picture has a yellowish tone to it, giving it a weird vibe, especially how the parts are placed together on the cover. Plus, even the band members have admitted they found this cover hard to stomach after it was released. And if the band members were grossed out by their cover, it definitely deserves a spot on this list. Torsopak is a Finnish band that has very special album covers. As the band's name is already explicit, you know how the cover will be. They are classified as both gore grind and pop grind. And yes, this is an actual subgenre of metal. One of the most popular songs is called Raped by Elephants, which is hilarious as you think it is, and it's the complete opposite of Toto Africa. And after you finish listening to the song, you will feel violated. Trust me. Now, their album cover, Erotic Diarrhea Fantasy, was released in 2004. The album's lyrics are focused on graphic violence, extreme fetishes and grotesque fetishes. Now, you wouldn't expect anything else from the cover. It features two naked girls kissing while being smeared in feces. I know there are people who are into this stuff. We covered people like Pampachu on my channel, but I am not definitely one of them, and I don't find this arousing at all. Plus, I will break one of the rules here and include two more covers to the mix, as they are just absurd. One of them, I'm not quite sure, I think it's a suicide victim, and the other one is some weird BDSM shit, at least I think that's what's going on. It's no wonder that the albums are also banned almost everywhere. I mean, you can't release things like this in public. You know that this was coming. Rage Against the Machines. They're a band who are famous for combining heavy metal, rap and funk music with anti-authoritarian lyrics. When they launched their first single, Kill in the Name, people were amazed by their sound and energy, and just one day later they dropped a self-titled debut album called Rage Against the Machine in 1992. It's highly regarded for its aggressive sound and controversial themes. Because of the lyrics and the sound of the album, the cover needed to be a message, a strong one for everyone who would listen to the album. They decided to use a black and white image of a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who set himself on fire. If this isn't extreme, I don't know what is. He did this as a way of protesting against the oppression of Buddhists by the South Vietnamese government in 1963. The image was captured by Malcolm Brownie and became one of the most iconic and haunting photographs of the 20th century. What was very haunting was how he remained completely still the whole time when the flames devoured his body. This is an extreme sacrifice for a cause, with his image going around the globe. And this is why they decided to put him on the cover. It sends a very strong message about protest and injustice. And despite its graphic nature, the album reached mainstream success. This album cover completely caught me off guard, and honestly, I don't even want to show you the blurred version of this image. Now, Scorpions is a band you probably heard of at some point. They are what many considered classic dad rock, or even granddad rock at this point. I mean, they're a band who formed in Hanover in Germany back in 1965. They are quite an iconic band with many powerful anthems and ballad songs. You definitely heard tracks like Rock You Like a Hurricane and Winds of Change, songs that have cemented their place in rock history. The fact that they are still active today is nothing short of impressive. The album we are going to look at now is called Virgin Killer. The alternative cover is something you would expect to see from a 70s rock band, just a bunch of hairy dudes who love to rock. But the first cover is explicit, let's say. Now, the original cover features a 10-year-old girl, fully nude, posing very suggestively with a shattered glass effect only covering her private area. And that's why I was afraid to capture this image, because it's basically CP, and yes, it's on the wiki page. And I hope you don't go out of your way to see that image, because that's creepy, man. But back to the cover. The band said this should symbolize the loss of innocence caused by time, as a metaphor that was tied to the album's themes. However, despite Germans being quite open to nudity, the album cover was condemned as exploitative and deeply inappropriate, sparking outrage and censorship worldwide. And to the band's surprise, it somehow completely overshadowed their intent and the artistic view they had. Also, something quite important to add here, that in 2008, the photograph emphasized that he, his wife, the girl's mother, sister and 3 female assistants had been present during this shooting, and they stated, "Back then, we loved and protected children and did not sleep with them." As far as my knowledge goes, the girl didn't have anything against it, not back then and not even now. Plus, I wanna add something quite interesting that happened in May of 2008. The far-right site called A World Net Daily reported a cover on Wikipedia to the FBI, and the wiki page was down for a few days, but it was ultimately deemed as a error erotic posing with no sexual activity. So they put it up back online again. And I don't know what to say here honestly, perhaps I'm completely wrong, but it is a bit disturbing to put a little girl completely naked on an album cover, especially if you are an adult and you are aware that there are people out there who would look at this picture in a predatory way. I don't know what to think about this, but let me know what you think of this whole fiasco. Big Black was an American post-hardcore band from Evanston, Illinois. Even though the band was only active from 1981 to 1986, they managed to get quite a following due to their extreme ways. The band's lyrics would often be around dark topics. Some of them are mutilation, murder, rape, child abuse. You're getting the point here, I think. Many of their songs are told like miniature stories of psychopaths doing evil things that the average person might merely contemplate. The album Headache, which was released in 1987, while not so notorious as the other albums, still managed to earn its spot on the list because of a shocking and deeply unsettling artwork they used for this album cover. I mean, the whole album is deliberately provocative, and the alternative image they used for the album cover was a very interesting pencil drawing of a person whose head is ripped apart by a fist with blood splashing out of his ears, but the original artwork was much more raw and blunt. It was only featured on a very limited edition of records, as the original album cover portrayed an actual victim whose head was in half, with exposed brain and skull pieces around the head. The picture was pulled straight from a forensic crime scene. But even if I don't condone this picture, it still gets along with the album's aggressive and mechanical style. And I think this album cover will haunt me for quite some time. But that was the intent of the album cover, I guess. Also, the third song on the album, called Grinder, is quite interesting, as they use a Roland TR-606 drum machine, so it feels like you are listening to a Doom soundtrack with vocals, which was kind of interesting. Until now, I think you saw that the metal scene loves their extreme ways. This is why the Austrian band Punkman Stench wanted something extra special for their cover. The band's content is quite something. They are some type of grindcore, while people consider them even as pop grind, and I really think we need a whole Iceberg chart only about the subgenres of metal, as this is getting really out of hand. But pop grind loves to convey themes of rape, sex with dark humor, but the band adds a sprinkle of coprophagia, which is the law for hating feces. When they released their album called Being Caught Buttering in 1991, despite it shouldn't be a funny album in a morbid way, it's oftentimes considered just grotesque. The album cover now is a black and white photograph of two decapitated human heads grotesquely sewed together around the mouth area, so it appears they are kissing. And also the two heads are elderly men, and what's even more disturbing about it, it's like they were yanked out of their bodies, with many parts still visible around the neck area, so it wasn't like a clean cut, if you catch my drift. And this photo really stands out comparing them to the rest. And also it was reportedly taken from a real autopsy file. And this was photographed by a guy known as Joel Peter Witken, who loves to photograph all kinds of weird and morbid stuff. And also to explore his work sounds like a fun idea. Maybe some of you already know something about him. And just like that, we can go to the next century.
The freezing moon can obsess you.
You know this was coming. Anyone who is into metal or black metal heard about this story. The story of the infamous Mayhem album cover. Dawn of the Black Hearts by Mayhem isn't just one of the most disturbing album covers ever, it's also one of the most infamous releases in music history. This album is a hallmark of black metal culture. It's symbolizing the genre's extreme ways and its willingness to cross every conceivable boundary there is. Beyond the shocking cover, the album is also notable for being an unofficial live recording showcasing Mayhem's raw, chaotic energy during a 1990 concert in Sarpsborg, Norway. It's an aggressive album characterized by tremolo-picking guitars and black metal vocals, with my favorite track on the album being Chainsaw Godfather. What a masterpiece right there. The live recording captures an unpolished, almost primal intensity that became a defining template for the genre. The reason why this ranks so low on the list will surprise you unless you know the story already. The cover you are seeing right now is blurred for obvious reasons, as I can't show it to you because this is an actual photo of Mayhem's lead vocalist known as Death, shortly after he died by suicide in 1991. The cover features a real-life photo that was taken after Death slit his throat and wrists and ultimately blew his head up with a shotgun. The first one who would found him was the Mayhem's guitarist and friend Anonymous. Anonymous thought of this to be neat, and somehow he had a camera on his hand, decided to take a picture and plaster it on their album cover. And the rest is history.
One of my best friends also killed himself. And as I'm trying to cope with this, Euronymous tells me that he has taken photos of his death. I got very upset by this, and I told him, I'm gonna beat you up, I'm gonna kill you. We burned the photos before you even talk to me again.
So yes, this cover depicts a real-life suicide scene, and it's much more raw and unsettling if we compare it to the previous one. The album cover is banned or heavily censored in most places, and the copies with the original cover are real collector's item. The reason why Death took his life was his intense depression, but also fascination with death and the obsession with corpse-like aesthetics. He would bury his stage clothes before a show to enhance the rotting smell and visuals. He would often cut himself on stage. I mean, there was a reason why they called him Death. Fiction is one thing, even if it can cross many boundaries and upset people. Plus, we need to add the fact that Anonymous basically took fragments of his skull and brain matter and sent it to other band members. How twisted and disturbing is that? This album cover is a morbid symbol of black metal extremism. It has been criticized as exploitative and morally wrong on so many levels, while others see it as an unfiltered representation of black metal's nihilism and their extreme philosophy. I do feel like this cover is dehumanizing the victim, but let me know what you think about this. If you're interested in the black metal scene and what happened to Anonymous and how he got killed by one of his fellow band members, just comment down below and I will gladly make a video just about it, because there are many weird and obscure stuff here to cover.
But he was also that on a regular daily basis. He slept with dead birds under his bed because he wanted to smell death. And it was an image. He was depressed. He was looking for death.
Now the album Zenjin Pseudoscorpion is an album that I can't even prove if it's 100% real. And I don't even want to go out of my way to search for it. And I have a good reason why. But I think this is the album cover. At least that's what the people online used while talking about this cover, as it's highly debated if this album even exists. Even if this album cover isn't the most disturbing you saw on this list, but because of the music featured in it, I put it on top tier. Now this Zenjin Pseudoscorpion is an album which was made with kids' screams. And by scream I mean their agonizing screams as they were taken from CP footage to make this album, to appeal to the most depraved people out there. This album perhaps is just an urban legend, I don't know, because it's very hard to find evidence about it, and like I said, I don't want to get out of my way to research it. Not only because it's sick and disturbing, but because basically I could end up in jail for possessing CP if they found this album on my PC, so that's a good reason I think. And I honestly don't know what to say about this. It's more than sick to think about it that some guy was sitting on his desktop, looking at the stuff, sampling it, and then tried to make an album about it. This is fucking gross. So that's the reason why I wanted to include this album on this chart, despite its existence being quite questionable. Now, Nicole 12 is the last entry on this layer, and with a good reason, because we couldn't prove the existence of the previous one. This one is very much real. Nicole 12 was a controversial power electronics music house project created by Miko Aspa, formed in 1998. Nicole's 12 work is highly controversial and it has sparked many moral and legal debates due to its extreme nature. Especially the album called Playground have faced criticism for its depiction of abuse and unspeakable acts, and the band's decision to create such art was also put in question. They are signed to a label called Freak Animals, which featured the most sickening albums you can find out there, much like this one. So the album Playground from Nicole 12 tries to explore the horrifying world of child abuse, exploitation and predatory behavior. However, it does it in such a way that it intentionally tries to put the listener in an extreme uncomfortable position. The band members said that this album wasn't approving these actions, but they said they needed to explore the horrors and the raw manner behind it. Many of these songs are delivered from the perspective of an abuser. There is no poetic metaphor here, because the themes are presented bluntly, in a way that leaves little room for emotional escape. It's raw and direct in every way, and it's more like a story than a song. It's hard to describe. They are like snippets of conversation, eerie childlike sounds, or even manipulated voices that evoke predatory behavior. How the music is unhinged, so it's the cover. The cover has a grainy, washed out look of a young girl laughing, looking actually quite happy, but when you know what the album is about, it feels more than unsettling. The kids' innocence and dark themes of the album make it such a strong contrast that it's difficult to describe. And apparently the creators of the album stated that this girl on the cover wasn't 12 like the album suggests, but she was actually a 27-year-old woman who was portrayed in a girl-like manner to appear very young. Like I said, the color palette, the distortion, the low-res vibe, somehow it perfectly blends with this, I don't know how to say it, but I won't even call it an album. That's it, I guess. What was your favorite album cover? And the most disturbing one you discovered? The last few were quite extreme in my opinion, but let me know what you think. But also tell me about your favorite artist down below, who has a very disturbing album cover. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe and consider joining my Patreon, so I can finally devote myself to this channel 24/7. If you're interested in other weird and dark stuff, there are plenty of videos on my channel, so check them out. That's all from me now. I've been Snorky, and until the next deep dive, stay curious.